Disclaimer: this story is a fictional narrative inspired by real-life legends, fan theories, and the global fascination with the supernatural lives of celebrities. It is not intended to disrespect the memory, legacy, or fans of Elvis Presley or any other historical figure. All events, characters, and hauntings described in this story are purely imaginary. Any similarities to real incidents are purely coincidental. This is a horror-themed tale created for entertainment purposes only. Listener discretion is advised. Lena Carter had always been different. While other girls in her class worshipped pop stars and followed modern music trends, Lena was fixated on a man who had died long before she was born, Elvis Presley. Her bedroom walls were a living shrine, vinyl records framed like precious art, Elvis memorabilia carefully preserved, and a life-sized cardboard cutout of him standing by her closet. For Lena, Elvis wasn't just a musical icon. He was an obsession, a spiritual presence she believed was still lingering somewhere in the world, maybe even watching her. Her dream came true on her 25th birthday when she won an exclusive contest sponsored by a paranormal podcast called Beyond the Grave. The prize was a rare, overnight VIP ghost tour inside Elvis's legendary mansion, Graceland, including areas that the public rarely got to see. Lena didn't hesitate for a second. She packed her record player, a vintage microphone she found in a thrift store, and an old reel-to-reel tape recorder. She wasn't just going as a fan. She was going as a seeker, someone determined to make contact with the spirit of the king himself. When she arrived in Memphis, Tennessee, Lena felt the pull of history. Graceland loomed large like a haunted monument. The mansion had been preserved meticulously, and walking through its gates felt like stepping back in time. That night, she joined 5 other winners, all self-proclaimed paranormal enthusiasts, and a host named Mason, the charismatic guide from the podcast. He welcomed them at the entrance with a warning: "You may not like what follows you back." Everyone laughed nervously. Lena didn't. The tour began with Elvis's living room, still arranged with peacock-stained glass and white couches. Then came the jungle room, with its bizarre green carpet and tiki decor, and the trophy room, filled with golden records and jumpsuits that shimmered in the dim light. But the one area that made everyone pause was the staircase leading to the second floor, where Elvis spent his final hours. "That floor is sealed," Mason said, shining his flashlight upward. "No one goes up there. It's the one area staff are forbidden to enter, even now. The family says it's out of respect. But some of us think it's something more." Lena's curiosity flared. She looked up at the dark landing and felt a chill, as if someone was watching them. Something unseen. Something waiting. After the main house, the group moved to the garage and meditation garden. Mason shared chilling tales of tourists hearing unexplained humming, sightings of a figure in a white jumpsuit near the windows at night, and even stories of electronic devices mysteriously recording music that no one remembered playing. Most people dismissed them as fan-fueled hysteria. But Lena believed. She always had. The night deepened. The guests were led to a guest house behind the mansion, where they'd spend the night. The atmosphere turned heavier. Lena felt a strange electricity in the air. Her hands tingled. Her thoughts raced. She couldn't sleep, not here, not now. Something was pulling her toward the mansion. Toward the forbidden staircase. Toward Elvis. Just past midnight, when everyone else seemed asleep, Lena quietly slipped out. The air outside was still. Moonlight bathed Graceland in silver. She clutched her microphone and recorder as she approached the back door Mason had left unlocked for the emergency exit. This wasn't trespassing, she told herself. This was discovery. Tribute. Inside the mansion once more, she walked slowly, absorbing the silence. As she passed the trophy room again, she thought she heard something, a faint piano chord. She froze. There it was again. A soft melody, distant yet familiar. She knew that tune. Can't Help Falling in Love. But there were no instruments in that room. No speakers. Just her and the echo of a memory long gone. Lena whispered, "Elvis." The melody stopped. Suddenly, a golden microphone, just like the one in her backpack, rolled across the floor from the hallway above. It stopped right at her feet. She bent down, picked it up, and smiled. She was getting closer. She could feel it in her bones. The golden microphone in Lena's hand felt cold, too cold. As she stood frozen in the dim hallway, her breath visible in the air, she realized something had shifted in the atmosphere of Graceland. The silence was no longer peaceful, it was watching her, listening to her. The piano music had stopped as abruptly as it began, and the rolling microphone now seemed less like a gift and more like a summons. Still, Lena pressed forward. She wasn't frightened, not yet. Curiosity pushed her deeper into the mansion. The rest of the guests were sound asleep in the guest house, and Mason hadn't noticed her slip away. She quietly made her way to the main staircase, the one that led to the off-limits second floor, a place tourists were strictly forbidden to visit. The staff never spoke about it. Some claimed it was out of respect for Elvis's memory. Others whispered that strange things happened up there, things that couldn't be explained. The rope barrier at the bottom of the stairs looked ceremonial, not secure. Lena stepped over it without hesitation. Her fingers brushed the banister as she climbed each step. The wood creaked softly beneath her weight, as if remembering every footstep that had ever passed before. She reached the landing. For the first time in her life, she stood before the door that led to Elvis's private bedroom, a room frozen in time. It was locked. Of course it was. But Lena had done her research. Fans and ghost hunters had speculated for years about a hidden entry point, a dumbwaiter shaft, a crawl space behind the closet, even a loose panel in the hallway wall. She scanned the corridor with a flashlight and spotted something strange near a large armoire, a slight gap in the paneling, barely visible. Heart pounding, she pushed. The wood gave way with a faint groan, revealing a narrow passage, just big enough for her to slip through. Inside, everything was preserved exactly as it had been decades ago. The bedroom was dimly lit by moonlight filtering through lace curtains. A large bed sat in the center, its velvet comforter untouched. On a nearby dresser lay a pair of aviator sunglasses, a bottle of cologne, and a tarnished ring. Lena stood in awe. She had crossed the threshold no fan had ever crossed. She was standing where Elvis had lived, loved, and ultimately died. Then the door behind her slammed shut. She spun around, heart in her throat. The door was sealed. There was no knob on this side. Panic began to rise in her chest, but she forced it down. She had her flashlight. She had her recorder. She was a believer after all. This was what she had come for. "Mr. Presley," she said softly. "Are you here?" The room responded with a low hum, barely audible, like the sound of an amplifier warming up. Lena turned her recorder on. The red light blinked steadily. She set it on the nightstand and began to speak. "My name is Lena Carter. I'm a fan, but I'm also here to understand. If you're here, if you're listening, I just want to talk. Please, give me a sign." Nothing. For a long, agonizing minute, there was only silence. Then her flashlight flickered. Once. Twice. And then it went out completely. Lena was plunged into darkness. She fumbled with the buttons, slapped the flashlight side, but it was dead. Her only light now came from the moon, casting strange shadows across the room. A breeze passed through, though the windows were shut. The room seemed to expand and contract like lungs taking breath. And then music. A gramophone in the corner, one that hadn't worked in decades, began to turn. Slowly, the needle dropped on a dusty record. The crackle of vinyl filled the air. A deep voice, smooth, rich, unmistakable, began to sing, "Are you lonesome tonight?" Lena's blood ran cold. It wasn't a recording she'd ever heard. The voice was more intimate, more raw, as though he were singing to someone in the room. To her. She turned toward the gramophone and saw something impossible. In the reflection of a tall mirror, across the room, a man in a white jumpsuit stood behind her. His face was half-shadowed, but his slicked-back hair, rhinestone-studded outfit, and tall frame left no doubt. It was Elvis. Her heart pounded against her ribcage as she spun around. No one was there. But in the mirror, the figure remained. Unmoving. Watching. His expression unreadable, somewhere between sorrow and menace. And then his lips moved. But no words came out. Just music. Lena couldn't breathe. The image of Elvis in the mirror still hovered, motionless, haunting. Though no one stood physically behind her, his reflection remained clear, like a memory burned into the glass. His lips were moving slowly, silently, as if he were lip-syncing to the song playing on the gramophone. But the track wasn't coming from the mirror, it was echoing from all around her, as though the walls themselves were singing. The room vibrated with a ghostly hum. Lena stumbled backward, nearly knocking over the nightstand. The reel-to-reel recorder on it suddenly clicked and began to spin, even though she hadn't pressed record. The red light blinked once, then stayed on. Whatever was happening, it was real, and it was being documented. The voice grew louder, clearer, more sorrowful. "I wonder if you're lonesome tonight." Lena had heard this song 1,000 times, but never like this. It felt personal now, painful. Like a message sent across time and death. She turned back to the mirror, and to her horror, Elvis's reflection was no longer alone. Another figure had joined him, a woman in a vintage dress, her features blurred, her arms looped through his. But her head was tilted unnaturally to the side, her neck appearing twisted. Lena blinked, and the woman vanished. Only Elvis remained. "No," Lena whispered. "This isn't just a residual haunting, is it?" She stepped closer to the mirror, trembling. "What do you want to show me?" Suddenly, all the sound cut off. The gramophone stopped spinning. The reel-to-reel halted. And then came a new sound, a slow, steady tap, tap, tap from upstairs. Or was it the ceiling? Maybe inside the walls? She followed the sound down the hall, past unopened doors and dusty paintings, until she reached the top of a narrow stairwell that seemed to descend into a recording studio. She had read about this room. Elvis had recorded several late-night demos in his final days. The place had been shut down after his death, supposedly abandoned, but now it hummed with life. Drawn like a moth to flame, Lena descended the stairs. The temperature dropped with each step. She could see her breath, feel her skin tighten with goosebumps. When she reached the bottom, the studio lights flickered on by themselves. Microphones hung from the ceiling. A grand piano sat under a sheet. A single reel-to-reel machine on a desk whirred and clicked. There was a stool in the center of the room, and it was rocking. She approached slowly. The air smelled of cigarette smoke and old vinyl. On the walls were old black-and-white photographs, Elvis in the studio, surrounded by producers and musicians. But as Lena looked closer, her heart sank. In each photo, Elvis's eyes were scratched out. Every single one. Her head began to ache. Pressure built in her ears. The walls of the studio began to vibrate with low-frequency noise, barely audible but bone-deep. Then the grand piano sheet slid off by itself and landed gently on the floor. The keys played a single mournful chord. Lena took a shaky step back. No, this isn't a dream. The microphone nearest to her swung toward her face. Then a voice, not Elvis's, boomed from the recording booth. Low. Hollow. Inhuman. He sang for them. Now he sings for me. Lena spun toward the sound, but the booth was empty. Then the reel-to-reel began playing back what it had just recorded. Her own voice came first from earlier. What do you want to show me? Then came a second voice layered underneath, one that hadn't been there before. A whisper. Barely a breath. Save me. Lena's spine stiffened. Save who? She called out. Elvis? The light in the booth burst, showering glass across the floor. Then came the piano again, more aggressive this time. A song playing backward. The keys thudded in a rhythm that sounded almost like Morse code. The door behind her slammed shut. The studio was now sealed. The lights flickered, the air thinned, and Lena felt the full weight of the haunting descend on her. She was no longer just a fan. No longer just an intruder. She was part of the recording now. Part of the music. And Elvis, or something wearing his image, was getting closer. Lena backed into the far corner of the recording studio, her chest heaving. The darkness surrounding her pulsed in waves, as if the mansion itself was breathing. The only sound in the room was the low, mechanical whir of the reel-to-reel as it continued to play the reversed piano melody. Each note felt wrong, dissonant, as if the song itself was being torn apart from the inside. She reached for her flashlight again, but it was still dead. Her phone had no signal. Her only company was the silent stare of the photographs lining the studio walls, photos where Elvis's face had either decayed or been deliberately defaced. It was as if someone or something had tried to erase his very identity from the space. Lena's instincts screamed at her to get out of there. But another, stronger pull dragged her toward the mystery. Something inside her told her that she wasn't done, not yet. That the true heart of the haunting wasn't down here in the studio, but still up there, behind the locked bedroom door. She pushed her way back up the stairs, each step heavy like walking through water. As she reached the top, she glanced back one last time at the studio, just in time to see the grand piano lid slam shut with a loud clang, as if it were telling her not to return. Back upstairs, the hallway was colder now. Shadows moved where there were no windows, no sources of light. Lena hurried toward the master bedroom door again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She needed to get in, to confront whatever presence had been appearing in the mirror and speaking through the tapes. Earlier, she had discovered a hidden passage, but she hadn't explored the entire thing. She crouched near the armoire and found the small hidden latch again. The panel swung open with a groan. This time, she noticed a second tunnel branching off deeper, toward the walk-in closet that connected directly to the master suite. She crawled through, heart pounding. The passage was tight, dusty, the air stagnant. Cobwebs brushed her face. After several minutes, she emerged behind a false wall inside the closet. Carefully pushing it open, Lena stepped into Elvis Presley's bedroom. The room was exactly as she imagined, large, pristine, and disturbingly untouched. A king-size bed with crushed velvet sheets dominated the space. A Bible lay open on the nightstand. An ashtray, filled with old lipstick-stained cigarette butts, sat beside it. The lamps glowed faintly, though none were plugged in. And then she saw it, the jumpsuit. It hung neatly inside a glass case in the corner, dazzling even in the gloom. The iconic white outfit with gold and red rhinestones shimmered like it had a heartbeat of its own. Lena stepped closer, placing her hand on the glass. "Why are you still here?" she whispered. "What are you waiting for?" She turned and jumped. The figure was back. Elvis stood in the middle of the room, his form faintly flickering like an old television image. He didn't move, didn't blink. His eyes, once warm and filled with charm in every photo and film Lena had seen, were now dark, sunken voids. His mouth opened wide, unnaturally wide. But no sound came out. Then, in a terrifying jolt, music erupted from behind her, the same reversed piano melody, now thunderously loud. The room shook. Items flew from the dressers. The Bible's pages flipped furiously. The bed levitated several inches into the air and slammed down again. Lena screamed, backing away from the ghost. The figure of Elvis flickered, then glitched, his face warping and stretching. He made a deal, and so will you. The bedroom door burst open on its own. A blinding white light flooded in. In that moment, Lena understood. This wasn't just a haunting. This was a prison. Elvis's ghost wasn't haunting Graceland by choice. His form flickered, sometimes crystal clear in his iconic white jumpsuit, other times distorted into something grotesque, eyes hollow, mouth gaping unnaturally wide, limbs twitching with every skipped beat of the ghostly music. Lena felt her body lock up. She was back in the 1970s, surrounded by warm studio lights, soft southern accents, and the rich scent of bourbon and cologne. Elvis sat at a piano in the recording room downstairs. He was alone, head bowed, fingers trembling above the keys. There was something on the table beside him, a contract. Old, yellowing, signed in his own blood. From the shadows, a figure watched him, a tall, faceless silhouette in a dark suit, with no eyes and no voice, yet somehow vibrating with power. It loomed behind Elvis, whispering things Lena couldn't hear, but somehow understood. Promises. Bargains. Fame. Elvis wasn't attacking her, he was begging her to intervene, to free him from whatever had bound his soul to this house of music and regret. But how? The tape recorder she'd brought earlier was still running in the other room. Her microphone, which had dropped to the floor during the chaos, sparked faintly. She picked it up, hand shaking. Something inside told her the answer was in the music, the sound that had carried his spirit all these years. The same sound that trapped him. She turned toward the old vinyl player still sitting on the dresser. With trembling fingers, she placed one of his original singles, Can't Help Falling in Love, on the turntable. She held the needle in place and looked back at the ghost. "If this is your song," she whispered, "then maybe it can set you free." The ghost paused, trembling. This time, it wasn't warped or backwards. It was pure. As the music played, the ghost shuddered, beginning to glow faintly around the edges. The terrifying distortion of his form softened, returning to something more human. And then he began to sing. Not aloud, but in Lena's mind. A duet, his soul and his song merging in harmony. Light filled the room. The walls trembled not from fear, but from release. The jumpsuit faded. The cold evaporated. And the figure of Elvis Presley looked at Lena one last time, smiling a real smile, and whispered with full voice, "Thank you. Thank you very much." Then, with a final note, he faded, not vanished, but dissolved into the music, into the very walls of Graceland, not as a prisoner, but as peace. The bedroom door gently swung shut. The house went still. Lena collapsed onto the bed, tears in her eyes, not from fear, but from the overwhelming beauty of it all. She had touched history. Not the glittering fame, but the buried soul beneath it. But deep in her chest, a quiet dread stirred. Because as the music faded, something else stirred within the walls. Something that had been behind the deal all along. And it wasn't gone. Not yet. Lena didn't leave the bedroom right away. The silence following Elvis's departure was heavy, not peaceful, but dense with questions. She sat there, catching her breath, surrounded by the chaos the spirit had left. An old 1950s-style concert hall, lined with red curtains and gold trim. A spotlight illuminated the center of the stage, where Elvis Presley stood. But this was not the warm, charismatic Elvis the world adored. His eyes were vacant, and his movements robotic. Behind him, in the shadows, stood the same faceless figure Lena had seen in her earlier vision, the being in the black suit, impossible to describe, like a silhouette against time itself. In the mirror, the scene played out like a silent film. Elvis bowed. The audience, a sea of expressionless, blurred faces, clapped in eerie unison. Behind the curtain, the dark figure held puppet strings that glistened like piano wire, and Lena realized with horror that Elvis's hands were attached to them. Suddenly, the mirror cracked, a jagged web cutting through the glass. And then the voice returned. He was not the first. The whisper came from behind her, yet Lena was alone. And he will not be the last. The door slammed shut once more, locking her inside. From the walls, new images began to bleed through, grainy projections like old home videos. Lena turned slowly, watching in terror as ghostly images flickered across the wallpaper, Marilyn Monroe staring into a mirror, tears rolling down her cheeks as a shadow loomed behind her. Jim Morrison, scrawling lyrics furiously while the lights in his hotel room flickered. Judy Garland collapsing on a stage, surrounded by invisible hands. One after another, they appeared, celebrity after celebrity, each one trapped in a moment of despair, terror, or submission. The voice returned, now layered and deeper. They came for fame. I offered eternity. Lena pressed her back against the wall, shaking. You made them stars. But you used them. They begged to be remembered. They never asked for the cost. Suddenly, her reel-to-reel tape recorder spun back to life on its own, the reel screaming in reverse. The lights dimmed, and Lena was pulled into another vision, this time, not through the mirror, but through her own mind. She was standing in a lavish hotel suite. It was raining outside. Elvis sat on the edge of his bed, sweat glistening on his forehead, breathing hard. In front of him was a suitcase with cash, pills, and a contract laid on top. The same shadowy figure appeared in the corner. It had no face, yet she could feel its eyes boring into her soul. And worst of all, it wanted her. You heard him, it hissed. He sang until he couldn't breathe. You'll too. For me. Lena stumbled back, slamming into the armoire behind her. Her trembling fingers fumbled for something, anything, to defend herself with. She grabbed a shattered piece of the broken mirror, clutching it like a blade, though what good it would do against something so otherworldly, she didn't know. You crossed the line, the voice coiled around her. And now the show must go on. The bedroom began to twist. The floorboards shifted and rearranged, becoming like a black stage with spotlights beaming down from nowhere. The posters and photographs on the walls peeled away, revealing curtains, deep red theater curtains, billowing even without wind. Lena blinked. She was no longer in Graceland's bedroom. She was inside a nightmare version of a concert hall. Thousands of seats stretched before her, filled with dark figures clapping slowly in unison. The same faceless audience she'd seen in the mirror. Their applause was dull, mocking. The stage beneath her feet burned with invisible fire. A voice echoed from the rafters. "Welcome our next act, Miss Lena Carter." A microphone dropped from above, swinging gently in front of her face. "No," she gasped. "I'm not part of this. I didn't make any deal." "You stepped on the stage," the voice growled. "That's all I need." The curtain behind her lifted, and from it emerged something wearing Elvis's form again. But this was not the pleading spirit she had helped before. This version of him was grotesque, eyes black as pitch, mouth stitched into a warped grin, moving with jerky, unnatural rhythm. He strummed an invisible guitar, and from it poured a twisted, backwards version of jailhouse rock. Lena fell to her knees, clutching her ears. The music wasn't just noise, it was pain, laced with whispers, broken notes, and screams buried beneath the rhythm. The stage around her cracked and splintered. And that's when she remembered something. The recording. Her tape recorder. Back in the bedroom, she had captured the real Elvis's message. His cry for help. If anything had power against this false creation, this parasitic force, it was the truth buried in his voice. Summoning every ounce of courage, Lena tore herself away from the stage illusion and sprinted through the curtains behind her. The hallway reappeared like a corridor through a collapsing dream, shifting and rotating like a Rubik's Cube. She pushed through doors, climbed stairs that bent sideways, and finally found herself back in the trophy room. She crashed to the floor and crawled toward the old reel-to-reel. Still intact. Still blinking. Still recording. Her hands trembled as she reversed the tape and hit play. At first, silence. Then came the voice. "Save me," and then, the music, the true, uncorrupted version of Elvis's final song. Lena turned the volume up to maximum, letting it blast through the speakers that lined the exhibit walls. The reaction was instant. The air screamed. The red curtains burned away. The faceless entity roared with fury. The ghostly Elvis puppet shattered into ash. The concert hall illusion tore itself apart as if the truth in the music was poison to it. The real song overpowered the false one, the melody acting like an exorcism. Flames erupted from the stage. The ground split. Dark hands reached up from beneath and dragged the entity downward, shrieking as it dissolved into shadow and smoke. Lena shielded her eyes as the walls burst into white light. Then silence. Real silence. Not empty. Not evil. Just still. Lena fell backward, gasping for air, her heart hammering in her chest. She didn't know how long she laid there. When she opened her eyes, it was morning. The sun was shining through the tall windows of Graceland. The rooms had returned to normal. No signs of fire or shadows or anything supernatural. Just dust and velvet and echoes. Had it all really happened? She looked down at the recorder still in her hand. Rewound. But a message scratched onto the reel's label with a nail or sharp object confirmed it. You broke the chain. Underneath it, in faded black ink, EP Lena sat quietly on the steps of Graceland, the first rays of morning sunlight glinting off the mansion's white columns. Her clothes were torn, her hair wild, and her hands still trembled slightly from the ordeal. But she was alive. The mansion was quiet again, almost unnaturally peaceful, as if the land itself had taken a breath it had held for decades. But the silence didn't mean she had answers. Not yet. After a while, Lena rose and walked back inside. The house felt hollow. Elvis's presence was gone, and so was the malevolent spirit. Yet the weight of everything that had happened lingered like smoke after a fire. She moved slowly, drawn almost instinctively toward the reel-to-reel recorder. The message was still there. You broke the chain. EP. It had been real. All of it. She packed the recorder and the tape into her bag, knowing she couldn't leave it behind. She had recorded something no one else had ever heard, Elvis's real final words, delivered not in song, but in plea. The world needed to know what had happened here. But how could she explain it? Who would believe her? Later that day, back in her hotel room, Lena sat down and replayed the entire tape. She wore headphones, not wanting the eerie message to fill the room again. The tape crackled, hissed, and played that same chilling line, "Save me." Then the music followed, pure, honest, vulnerable. Elvis hadn't been performing. He had been confessing. She listened again and again. And that's when she noticed something strange. In the background of the audio, beneath Elvis's voice, barely audible, was another voice. A whisper. She isolated it and enhanced the frequencies using editing software. What emerged chilled her more than anything she'd heard inside Graceland. More will come. He was only the first. Lena froze. The entity hadn't been unique to Elvis. It had used him, fed off his fame, his isolation, his pain, but it wasn't. What if they had all been targeted by the same parasitic force? What if their artistic genius made them perfect hosts for something ancient that fed on fame, talent, and despair? What if Elvis had been trying to warn her, not just for himself, but for all of them? The weight of the truth crushed her. Her documentary couldn't just be about Graceland now. It had to be about the pattern, the hidden terror that had lurked in the shadows of music, film, and fame. Lena's experience had become a key to a much larger mystery, and she had no choice but to follow it. But that night, as she sat alone with the edited recording and her growing pile of notes, something happened. The lights in her hotel room flickered. The temperature dropped sharply. And then, her laptop screen changed. Her audio file began to replay itself. Only this time, the voice had changed. It was Elvis again, yes, but the tone was different. Not pleading. Not grateful. Possessed. "You opened the door, Lena," the voice rasped from the speakers. "And now you've joined the show." The screen glitched. For a moment, her reflection in the laptop screen wasn't her own. It was a pale version of herself, eyes black, lips moving to a song she wasn't singing. She slammed the laptop shut, heart hammering, and scrambled for the hotel phone. No dial tone. Then a soft knock on the door. She approached cautiously, her breath shallow. Another knock, louder this time. When she opened it, there was no one there. Just a package on the ground. Inside, a single vinyl record. No label. Just engraved initials scratched into the center. Lena staggered back, horrified. Marilyn Monroe. The curse wasn't broken. It had only shifted its attention. And Lena Carter had now become the next verse in a song that refused to end. 86.